When fear controls you, remember this one Stoic rule. Fear never arrives shouting. It creeps in quietly, reshaping your thoughts until you begin to believe that the safest choice is to step back, stay silent, or avoid the path that could change everything. You feel it long before you name it, a tightening in your chest, a thought you replay over and over until it becomes a warning, a hesitation disguised as logic, a voice telling you to wait, to prepare, to be absolutely certain before moving forward. Fear convinces you that you are being careful, when in truth it is training you to abandon yourself. You start living as if danger is everywhere and strength is nowhere inside you. The Stoics understood this trap long before our world became loud, stressed, and relentlessly demanding. They knew that fear does not need a real threat to dominate your life. It only needs your attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind takes the shape of whatever it holds on to. Hold fear, and your world shrinks. Hold clarity, and your world expands. Everything depends on where you allow your thoughts to rest. When fear becomes your default place, you forget that courage is built in action, not in certainty. Most people believe fear is a problem created by the outside world. They imagine it rising from a difficult future, from people's opinions, from the possibility of failure. But fear rarely comes from what is actually happening. It comes from what the mind projects will happen. That projection feels real because your mind does not distinguish much between imagination and experience. It reacts to imagined danger as if it is unfolding right in front of you. This is why fear feels heavy even when nothing threatening is present. The weight you carry is the weight of possibilities, not realities. There is a moment in every life where fear becomes too familiar. You stop noticing how often you hesitate. You stop questioning why you doubt yourself. You stop realizing that most of your decisions are shaped to avoid discomfort instead of pursuing purpose. You call it being responsible or being prepared, but deep down you feel the truth. You know you are holding back. You sense that something inside you is waiting for permission to act. That permission never comes from fear. It must come from you. The Stoics faced wars, exile, betrayal, and uncertainty on a scale few people today will ever encounter. Yet they managed to remain anchored, steady, and unshaken. Not because they were fearless, but because they knew how to think clearly when fear pressed against them. They practiced a mental discipline that transformed fear from a master into a messenger. They questioned their thoughts, challenged their assumptions, and redirected their focus toward what could be controlled. This is where the one Stoic rule emerges, the rule that can break fear's grip and reconnect you to your own strength. Before revealing that rule, you need to understand why fear can feel so powerful. Fear becomes strong the moment you allow your mind to run into the future. It grows when you try to control outcomes you cannot control. It gains momentum when you try to manage what people think, how life will unfold, or how every possible scenario might play out. The more you extend your mind beyond the present moment, the weaker you feel. The more you try to control the uncontrollable, the more fear convinces you that you are not enough. This introduction prepares you for a shift, a moment where fear stops being a force that controls you and becomes something you look at directly. The Stoics believed that clarity begins with truth. The truth here is simple. Fear has power only when you hand it the authority to decide for you. This video exists to take that authority back. It exists to remind you of a rule so direct and so liberating that it cuts through fear the same way a sharp blade cuts rope. You will not eliminate fear. You will override it by aligning your mind with what truly depends on you. When that alignment happens, fear loses its command. Your life changes the moment you stop letting fear write the story. Now you begin the process of writing your own. The invisible hand. How fear quietly dictates your choices. You rarely notice the moment fear takes control. It does not strike like a sudden storm. It behaves more like a slow leak that drains your confidence, drop by drop. It disguises itself as overthinking, caution, preparation, responsibility, or even common sense. But beneath all those names sits the same force, shaping your actions without asking for permission. Fear convinces you that the safest path is the one where you do nothing, decide nothing, and risk nothing. It pushes you into hesitation until hesitation becomes your default response to life. Most people imagine fear as something loud and obvious, something that shows up only in dramatic moments. The truth is more subtle. Fear often hides inside ordinary decisions. It shapes your choices when you avoid applying for a job because you might not be qualified. It whispers to you when you delay a dream because the timing is not perfect. It slows you down when you want to speak up but decide to stay quiet to keep the peace. It convinces you to remain where you are because moving forward feels uncomfortable. Without realizing it, fear becomes the architect of your routine. The Stoics believed that the greatest danger is not external hardship, but internal surrender. They saw fear as a mental habit that grows stronger each time you obey it. Every avoided challenge, every moment you choose comfort over truth, strengthens fear's influence. You do not become weaker because the world is difficult. You become weaker because you let fear become familiar. Once fear stops feeling like an obstacle and starts feeling like part of your personality, it becomes the invisible hand directing your life. Fear is persuasive because it uses the language of protection. It tells you that waiting will keep you safe. It tells you that staying small will prevent disappointment. It tells you that avoiding risk will preserve your peace. What it really does is trap your mind in a cycle where you are constantly preparing but never moving. Fear uses the illusion of safety to steal the possibility of growth. The Stoics understood that a life built on avoiding discomfort becomes a life built on avoiding purpose. Your mind reacts to fear the same way it reacts to real danger, even when no danger is present. When fear surfaces, your thoughts accelerate, your body tenses, and your breathing changes. That physiological response is designed for survival. But in the modern world, it is triggered by imagined outcomes, not real threats. Your brain creates a story, then treats that story as truth. You begin to act according to what you fear might happen instead of what is actually happening. You do not respond to reality. You respond to a prediction your mind created and labeled as certainty. This is why you often feel stuck. You see two paths ahead, the one you want and the one fear pushes you toward. When you choose fear's path, you do not feel relief. You feel a quiet disappointment. You sense that something inside you has been ignored. Over time, that ignored part of you becomes harder to hear. You begin to believe you are someone who cannot change, cannot progress, cannot take risks. Fear shapes your identity long before you realize it has shaped your destiny. The Stoics taught that clarity begins with noticing your thoughts without obeying them. They believed that wisdom is the ability to separate instinct from choice. Fear is instinct. Courage is choice. When you fail to see the difference, fear becomes your internal commander. It dictates when you act, when you speak, when you try, and when you retreat. But once you begin questioning the thoughts that fear generates, you reclaim the ability to choose for yourself. This chapter exposes a truth many people never face. Fear is not a reaction. It is a strategy your mind uses to avoid uncertainty. But uncertainty is where growth lives. The moment you begin asking the right questions, the moment you challenge the stories fear tells you, you weaken its hold. You start to see that the invisible hand controlling your choices is nothing more than a shadow created by your own mind. Shadows disappear the moment you bring them into the light. In the next chapter, you will discover the Stoic disruption that breaks this invisible control. A single rule that interrupts fear at the source and returns your mind to a place of strength, clarity, and ownership. The Stoic disruption. Interrupting fear at the source. Fear gains its strength from one simple habit, your mind trying to control what it never had control over. Every moment of anxiety, every wave of doubt, every decision you postpone is tied to the same internal mistake. You are projecting your attention into the future, into outcomes, into reactions, into possibilities that do not depend on you. The Stoics identified this as the root of emotional chaos. They believed that fear becomes powerful only when you forget the boundary between what belongs to you and what does not. This is where the one Stoic rule steps in with force. The rule is direct. The rule is confrontational. The rule is liberating. It says, control only what depends on you. Release everything that does not. This is not a motivational phrase. It is a mental discipline, a psychological weapon, and a spiritual anchor. When you apply it correctly, the power of fear collapses because fear cannot survive in a mind that stays grounded in what is truly controllable. Think of how fear operates. It convinces you that you must ensure everything goes perfectly. It tells you that you need certainty before acting. It makes you plan for every possible negative outcome. It urges you to predict what people will think, how they will respond, and whether you will succeed. None of these things fall under your control. When your mind attaches to them, fear takes the driver's seat, because the more you try to control what isn't yours, the more powerless you feel. The Stoics refused to fight fear directly. They understood that wrestling with fear gives it more strength. Instead, they redirected the mind to the only place where fear loses influence, the present action that depends entirely on them. This is why Epictetus said that freedom begins the moment you stop trying to control the external world and take full command of your inner world. That shift is the disruption. That shift is the rule. When you live by this principle, your thoughts become sharper. Fear loses its foundation because most of its predictions involve things outside your influence. You stop worrying about outcomes and start focusing on execution. You stop fearing judgment and start focusing on behavior. You stop imagining failure and start concentrating on the next right step. The more you commit to what depends on you, the quieter fear becomes. It has nothing left to hold on to. This rule also dismantles perfectionism. When you no longer tie your worth to results, you stop demanding perfection before acting. You stop chasing guarantees. You stop believing that you must feel ready before taking the first step. The Stoics believed that readiness is not an emotion. It is a decision. You choose to act not because the path is certain, but because the action aligns with your values. Once your focus is anchored internally, fear cannot manipulate you through imagined futures. This shift is not natural at first. Your mind is trained to chase control. It wants to predict. It wants to secure. It wants to eliminate risk. But this impulse is exactly what creates the anxiety you experience. The more you practice returning to what belongs to you, the stronger you become. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes unstoppable once it understands where its true strength lies. That strength is in your attention, your choices, your discipline, your reasoning, your actions. Nothing else. Imagine how your life would change if you applied this rule consistently. Imagine how much mental space would return to you if you stopped trying to manage people's opinions. Imagine how much courage would emerge if you no longer feared outcomes. Imagine how much peace would grow inside you if your energy focused only on what you can influence. This rule does not remove fear, but it removes fear's ability to manipulate you. You act with clarity, not with desperation. Fear loses its voice when you stop feeding it with scenarios you cannot control. The Stoic rule interrupts fear at the source by dividing the world into two categories: what is yours and what is not. The moment you honor that boundary, fear becomes nothing more than a background noise you can recognize but no longer obey. This is where strength begins. The next chapter goes deeper into the mind's most destructive habit and reveals why fear feels so real even when it is built on illusion. The mind's worst habit: predicting problems that don't exist. Fear intensifies when your mind begins forecasting what could go wrong. It imagines outcomes, creates warnings, and prepares you for dangers that have not happened. This habit feels protective, but it drains your strength long before anything real occurs. The Stoics saw anticipation as one of the greatest sources of human suffering. They understood that most people are crushed not by actual events, but by the stories their mind constructs about what might happen. This habit, once formed, becomes automatic. You start living in a future that has not arrived, reacting to threats that do not exist, and exhausting yourself with problems that only exist as thoughts. The mind prefers prediction because prediction creates the illusion of control. If you can imagine every worst-case scenario, then you can prepare for it. If you prepare for it, then you cannot be surprised. That is the logic fear uses to trick you. But the more you anticipate trouble, the more anxious you feel. The more anxious you feel, the more scenarios you imagine. The cycle feeds itself. You begin responding to imagined futures instead of responding to the present reality. The Stoics believed this was a misuse of human imagination. Instead of using your imagination to build possibilities, you use it to build prisons. Fear thrives in uncertainty. When the future is unclear, your mind fills the emptiness with negative predictions. It believes that imagining the worst will protect you, when in truth, it only paralyzes you. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. He observed people who lived defeated lives because they rehearsed disasters that never arrived. They carried the weight of defeats they never experienced. They mourned losses that never happened. They lived in fear of futures that never became real. The mind turns possibilities into burdens. Your brain reacts to these imagined dangers as if they are happening now. Your body tenses, your breathing shifts, your thoughts accelerate. Your emotions respond to the scenario your mind created instead of the world around you. You experience the consequences of fear without the presence of danger. This is why fear feels so heavy. The burden is psychological, not situational. You are living a future that exists only in thought, and your body believes every part of it. The Stoics challenged this habit with sharp clarity. They taught that wisdom requires separating what is possible from what is probable. Just because something can happen does not mean it will. This distinction creates mental freedom because it stops you from assuming the worst by default. The modern mind has an instinct to exaggerate danger. It imagines failure even when success is possible. It imagines rejection even when acceptance is likely. It imagines catastrophe even when stability is the most reasonable outcome. This instinct kept ancient humans alive in dangerous environments, but now it traps modern humans in cycles of needless fear. When you begin evaluating your thoughts instead of obeying them, everything changes. You ask, is this fear based on evidence or imagination? Is this outcome probable or simply possible? Am I reacting to reality or to a story my mind has created? These questions weaken fear by exposing its foundation. Fear thrives in ambiguity. It loses power under examination. The moment you challenge your predictions, the emotional grip of fear loosens. This chapter matters because it reveals something essential. Fear often feels real because you have trained your mind to treat imagination as truth. The Stoics believed that the mind must be disciplined not only in action, but in interpretation. You cannot control the thoughts that appear, but you can control how you respond to them. You can choose not to believe every warning your mind produces. You can choose to return to the present moment instead of living in a future that has not happened. The next chapter introduces the practice that brings you back to reality every time fear attempts to pull you into prediction. It is the discipline of returning, a Stoic method for grounding the mind in what is real, controllable, and immediately actionable. It is the antidote to anxious forecasting and the path back to clarity. The discipline of returning, training your mind to come back to reality. Fear grows the moment your mind drifts away from what is real. It grows when you abandon the present for imagined futures, when you chase predictions, when you overthink outcomes that do not belong to you. The Stoics developed a discipline to counter this drift. They called it returning. Returning is the act of pulling your mind back from the world of anticipation and grounding it in what is immediately in front of you. It is simple but not easy. It requires awareness, honesty, and repetition. When you master this discipline, fear loses its ability to scatter your thoughts. The modern mind is constantly pulled away from reality. Notifications drag your attention into other people's opinions. Stress pulls you into tomorrow's problems. Doubt pulls you into failures that have not happened. You begin living in every moment except the one you can actually influence. Returning interrupts this pattern. It stops the mental spiral before it gains momentum. It reminds you that the present moment is the only place where strength can be built and action can be taken. Marcus Aurelius practiced returning every morning. Before interacting with the world, he reminded himself of the challenges he might face and reaffirmed the values he would carry into the day. This was not pessimism. It was preparation rooted in reality. He grounded his expectations so that life could not destabilize him. He returned to the truth that his thoughts, choices, and responses were his responsibility. Everything else was outside his command. By aligning himself with what depended on him, he prevented fear from scattering his mind. Returning does not mean pretending fear does not exist. It means refusing to let fear hijack your attention. When fear arises, you do not fight it. Fighting it gives it strength. Instead, you observe it and redirect your focus to what you can do right now. This might be breathing deeply to calm your body. It might be taking a small action that moves you forward. It might be speaking an uncomfortable truth. It might be organizing your thoughts on paper so you can see them clearly. Each small act grounds you in reality and pulls you out of the imagined disaster your mind created. The Stoics taught that the mind becomes powerful when it is united with present action. You cannot be courageous in the future. You cannot be disciplined in the past. You can only act here now. Returning is the bridge between fear and clarity. You step away from prediction and step into presence. You return from imagined futures to the concrete responsibilities in front of you. You shift from what-ifs to what is. This shift transforms your mental landscape. Modern psychology echoes this principle. When your attention is overwhelmed, your mind begins searching for threats. It becomes reactive, scattered, and defensive. But when you ground yourself in the present, your nervous system stabilizes. Your thinking becomes logical. Your emotions stop spiraling. Your decisions become aligned with your values. Returning is not just a Stoic technique. It is a biological reset that brings your brain back to balance. Returning also strengthens your identity. When you constantly live in anticipation, you become someone who reacts to fear. When you live in the present, you become someone who responds with intention. You build self-respect by showing yourself that you can act even when fear whispers otherwise. You prove to yourself that fear is not your compass. You step back into authorship of your life. The Stoics believed that character is formed not in moments of comfort, but in moments where the mind must return to clarity despite discomfort. You practice returning every time you catch yourself drifting into fear and choose to come back. Over time, the gap between fear and clarity becomes smaller. You no longer stay lost in anxious imagining. You return faster, act sooner, and think more clearly. The discipline becomes natural, almost automatic. Fear loses its influence because it can no longer pull you into a world you no longer entertain. The next chapter reveals why courage is not something you wait to feel, but something you choose to practice even when fear is heavy. Returning prepares the ground. Courage is the seed you plant in it. Courage as a decision, not a feeling. Courage is misunderstood in the modern world. People think it is a feeling, a spark of confidence that finally arrives and gives you permission to act. They wait for it, they hope for it. They assume that courage comes after fear disappears. The Stoics rejected this idea completely. They believed courage is not an emotion, but an act of alignment. It is choosing what is right even while fear is present. It is choosing truth, even when doubt is loud. It is choosing action even when the outcome is unclear. Courage is a decision grounded in values, not a sensation that appears out of nowhere. Fear tells you to wait for certainty. It convinces you that you must feel strong before moving. It demands that you eliminate risk before taking the first step. That mindset traps you in inaction. If you wait to feel brave, you will wait forever. The Stoics understood that feelings cannot be trusted as guides for meaningful action. Emotions shift with fatigue, stress, distraction, and habit. Courage requires something deeper than emotion. It requires clarity about what you stand for and who you intend to become. When you see courage as a decision, everything changes. You stop trying to eliminate fear and start trying to rise above it. You stop analyzing your emotions and start evaluating your values. You ask yourself what matters most in this moment. You ask what action is aligned with your integrity. You ask what the version of you that you admire would do. Fear does not disappear, but its voice becomes background noise. You act from intention, not instinct. The Stoics trained courage through small, deliberate actions. They understood that big moments of bravery are not born from sudden strength, but from thousands of small decisions made consistently. A moment of honesty when lying would be easier. A step forward when retreat would feel safer. A difficult conversation when silence would avoid discomfort. These micro acts of courage build a foundation that makes larger acts possible. Each small decision teaches your mind that fear does not command you. You command you. Courage is also a form of self-respect. When you choose action despite fear, you prove to yourself that you are capable. You demonstrate that you can trust your own judgment. You show yourself that you are not ruled by the trembling parts of your mind. This internal proof matters. Each courageous act strengthens your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who faces discomfort, someone who does not abandon the path just because it is steep. Fear becomes manageable the moment you realize it cannot stop you from acting. It can only try to influence you. The Stoics understood that fear is an internal voice, not an external force. It has no physical power. It cannot hold you in place. It cannot move your body. It cannot block your path. It speaks, but you choose whether to obey it. That choice is the essence of courage. Action taken in the presence of fear becomes a declaration of strength. Modern society teaches people to look for confidence, but confidence is a result, not a prerequisite. Confidence grows after courageous action, not before. Every time you choose to act while afraid, you build evidence that you can handle life. This evidence becomes internal strength. You stop needing reassurance. You stop needing guarantees. You stop seeking comfort before movement. You rely on your own discipline and your own clarity. Courage becomes your compass. It directs you toward growth, truth, and personal evolution. The more often you choose it, the more natural it becomes. The Stoics believed that a person who chooses courage consistently becomes unshakable, not because they never feel fear, but because they no longer treat fear as a command. They treat it as a signal that they are stepping into a meaningful challenge. Courage turns fear into a guide rather than an obstacle. This chapter lays the foundation for what comes next. You now understand why courage is built in action, not emotion. In the next chapter, you will see how the Stoic rule transforms fear into power when applied to real situations in your modern life. Courage is the decision. The next chapter shows its execution. The rule in action, transforming fear into power. Fear feels overwhelming when it is vague, undefined, and floating in the back of your mind. It feels like a fog that covers everything, making even simple decisions feel heavy. But when you apply the Stoic rule in real situations, fear begins to break apart. It becomes something you can work with, not something you must escape from. The rule is simple. Control only what depends on you. Release what does not. When you apply this rule deliberately, fear loses the shape it uses to intimidate you. Your mind becomes sharper, your actions become cleaner, your decisions become anchored in reality instead of imagination. Consider the fear of failure, Most people fear failure not because the action is difficult, but because they tie their worth to the outcome. They imagine embarrassment, judgment, disappointment, or regret. None of those reactions fall under their control. What depends on you is the effort, the preparation, the intention, and the honesty behind your actions. When you shift your attention from the outcome to the execution, fear weakens. You do not fear taking the step, because the step is all that belongs to you. The outcome is not in your command. The Stoics would say, act well and let the rest unfold as it must. Now consider the fear of rejection. This fear is powerful because it tries to convince you that your value is determined by someone else's response. But their response does not depend on you. Their opinion, their reaction, their interpretation belong to them. What depends on you is the courage to speak truthfully, the clarity to act with integrity, and the discipline to honor your own needs. When you accept that you cannot control another person's mind, you stop fearing their judgment. You are free to act authentically. That freedom is strength. The fear of uncertainty might be the most universal of all. People want guarantees before taking action. They want proof that things will work out. They want to eliminate risk entirely. But uncertainty is built into life. The Stoics embraced it rather than feared it. They knew that certainty is an illusion. What depends on you is preparation, resilience, patience, and adaptability. When you focus on those, uncertainty becomes less threatening. You no longer need the future to be predictable because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. Fear transforms into readiness. Even the fear of starting something new fits into this pattern. Whether it is a project, a habit, or a life change, the mind generates reasons to wait. You fear not knowing enough, you fear making mistakes, you fear being seen as inexperienced. But the beginning of anything is supposed to be imperfect. The only part that depends on you is the first step. The courage to begin belongs entirely to you. Master the beginning and the path will shape itself. The Stoics believed that momentum carries wisdom. Action clarifies what hesitation obscures. Imagine applying the Stoic rule in a moment of intense fear. You feel your chest tighten, your thoughts scatter. You begin imagining everything that could go wrong. Instead of spiraling, you interrupt the pattern. You ask yourself, what depends on you right now? You identify one small action that aligns with your values. You take that action. The moment you do, fear loses its dominance. It cannot stop you from moving when your mind is anchored to what you can influence. Action is your anchor. Clarity is your compass. When the Stoic rule is practiced consistently, it becomes a way of living. You stop being controlled by emotions that rise and fall with circumstances. You stop trying to manage the impossible. You stop wasting energy on factors beyond your reach. Instead, you build a life grounded in discipline, perspective, and intention. Fear becomes a signal instead of a sentence. It tells you where growth is waiting. It shows you where you are expanding. It highlights the path you should lean into, not run away from. This is how fear transforms into power, not by eliminating it, but by refusing to hand it control. By choosing what depends on you in every situation, you train your mind to act with strength, even when uncertainty remains. The Stoics believed that a person who masters this practice becomes unshakable. They are not fearless. They are steady. They are present. They are grounded in what they command and unattached to what they cannot. This is where freedom lives. The next chapter brings everything together. It shows how your entire life changes when you stop waiting for fear to leave and start acting despite its presence. Clarity returns, purpose grows, strength becomes natural, your life without fear's permission. There comes a moment when you look back and realize how much of your life was shaped by hesitation, how many opportunities you avoided, how many conversations you swallowed, how many dreams you delayed because fear convinced you that you were not ready, not strong enough, not deserving. But the truth is that fear never had the authority to decide any of that. You gave it power by treating its voice as truth. The Stoics believed that inner freedom is reclaimed the moment you stop seeking fear's permission to live. That is the moment where life shifts. That is the moment where you return to yourself. You have now seen fear from every angle. You understand how it hides in your choices. You understand how it grows when your mind drifts into imagined futures. You understand the Stoic rule that interrupts its influence. You understand why courage is a decision and not a feeling. You understand how the discipline of returning grounds you in what is real. With these pieces in place, you begin to see what your life looks like when fear is no longer your guide. It becomes a life led by clarity, by purpose, by reason, by discipline, by intention. A life without fear's permission is not a life without fear. It is a life where fear no longer decides who you become. You feel the emotion, acknowledge it, and continue moving. You do not shrink yourself in its presence. You do not negotiate with it. You do not wait for it to quiet down. You act because the action aligns with your values. You speak because the truth matters. You step forward because stagnation is no longer acceptable. The Stoics taught that a virtuous life is a life lived in alignment with reason, not emotion. You return to this principle every time fear attempts to steer you off course. When you stop letting fear write the script, your world expands. You take risks that align with your growth. You pursue goals that once felt out of reach. You hold boundaries you used to avoid. You express ideas that once felt too vulnerable to share. You trust your judgment. You move with conviction. Your energy is no longer scattered by overthinking. Your focus is no longer trapped in prediction. You have more mental space, more emotional calm, and more inner strength. Because you are no longer fighting battles in worlds that do not exist. This transformation brings a new type of peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding discomfort, but the deep peace that comes from standing firmly in your values. When you live this way, your life becomes bolder and quieter at the same time. Bolder because you take decisive action. Quieter because your mind stops creating unnecessary noise. You begin to experience what the Stoics meant by tranquility, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of internal order. Your future becomes something you build, not something you fear. You understand that uncertainty is not an obstacle, but a companion. You understand that failure is not a threat, but a teacher. You understand that rejection is not a verdict, but an interpretation. You understand that most of what once frightened you were ghosts created by your own mind, and ghosts lose all power once you walk directly toward them with clarity and intention. As you stand here at the end of this journey through fear, you hold the rule that anchors everything else. Control only what depends on you. Release what does not. Apply this rule and your life becomes simpler, stronger, and more aligned with the person you are capable of being. This is the Stoic path. Not a path of emotionless detachment, but a path of disciplined action, mental clarity, and unwavering purpose. If you choose to live by this rule, your life changes. You stop shrinking, you stop hiding, you stop waiting, you stop negotiating with fear, you step into the world with a steady mind and a clear heart. You become someone who acts not because the path is easy, but because the action is right. You become someone who walks forward even when fear walks beside you. You become someone who leads your life rather than being led by your fears. This is the life the Stoics pointed to, a life rooted in reason, courage, intention, and truth. A life where fear is present but powerless.